You're listening to Daniel W. Shrigley's Survival Talk Radio, the official survival talk radio of America's Survival Son. Come and learn survival.
Survive this.
Hey, this is Dan Shrigley. Welcome to today's broadcast. And we're going to be covering survival kits for your vehicle and warmer climates. So it is getting warmer out. It's that time of year. It's spring, and summer's going to be coming up soon. So in certain areas, as you know, it's going to be warmer because it's no longer winter. So we had a pretty rough winter for a lot of folks, especially back east on the East Coast in the United States and abroad. But the one thing that we always got to do when we are talking about survival kits and in relation to your vehicle is, one, you need to have a vehicle survival kit for the vehicle itself. So you're going to want to have extra fuses. You're going to want to have things that you might need if you're on the road and you're in a place that you're not going to have access to certain things like hoses and belts and spark plugs and water and antifreeze and oil and patch kits for tires and snow chains and things like that. And make sure you have the proper jack equipment. And so you want to have the vehicle survival kit so that way you can get your road-worthy vehicle to road-worthy condition as long as you have all the things that you're going to need. Aside of the survival kit for the vehicle, you need the survival kit inside the vehicle for humans. And if you have pets, you're going to want something for them too. So the one thing that you're going to want to make sure you always have a plethora of is water, H2O, and you're going to want to have it in containers. And in your survival kit for water, a lot of people ask me often, well, how much water should I pack in my vehicle and for how many people? All right, just remember, a gallon of water a day for each adult, okay? And kids actually need more water. And the reason why is they need more water because kids go through it, they're wasteful, and also health and hygiene. So you're going to also want to pack a little bit of extra water. So for a kid, you might want to have, on hand for a survival situation, a gallon and a half for a child. So, and also you got to remember health and hygiene, the 5 F's. You got to remember that too. When you're camping, if you're in survival mode or whatever that situation is, you're going to want to protect yourself from fecal matter, fingers, flies, food, so and fluids. So waste products is what we're talking about when we're talking about fluids. So you want to make sure that your body's clean, so you're not putting things into your mouth by contact with your hands. That if you have dirty hands, obviously, what you touch and then you consume it might be on your food. So you got to watch out for that. When you are packing your survival kit, you got to pack it so it's unique to what your needs are too. So if you take medication, you want to make sure you have that. You have certain requirements that are unique to you, then you're going to want to make sure you have your extras of that. So that could be anything from prescription medication to over-the-counter. So we want to always make sure that our comfort factors are met, but our survival factors are really more important. But if you're on medication, that is prescribed to you for whatever reason that is, then that also becomes a survival factor that's important. So do not forget to pack extra medication into your survival kit. Now, we're talking about functions of your survival kit and what those are and items to put in those. So remember, when I was co-hosting the radio show Survival Talk Northwest, me and Travis Johnson from the Northwest Survival School did a discussion point on one of the episodes about the utilization of tools. And we both agreed that it's better to have tools in your kit that have 3 practical uses or more. Now, you might not get 3 practical uses or more per kit, but it's a good idea to try to aim for that and target that as a goal for each item you put in your kit. So remember that. Now, when you're packing your kit, you also want to pack it so it's specific to the region or the areas for which you will be traveling. Remember, you're traveling. And you're in a vehicle, so you're going to be able to go through different geographical terrains easily, so you're going to want to make sure you have everything you're going to need to cover all your bases. You could easily be in Reno, Nevada, like I am right now, and be crossing over to the Bay Area, and be leaving the desert and going into the mountains, and going over Donner Pass and down into, the valley. So you're going to want things like, what if you come along snow? You're going to want snow chains. What if it's snowing pretty bad? You're going to want to make sure that your vehicle can make it. You're going to want to make sure you have antifreeze. You're going to want to make sure your vehicle's maintained and maintenance properly and all that stuff. You want to check your oil. You're going to want to do the basics to make your trip successful. And you want to be prepared for the worst. Now, if you are on the main routes, rescue's going to probably come pretty easy because you're going to be on the main routes. But by chance you are off the main routes and maybe you're not traveling long distance, maybe you're traveling to go do some recreational activities. And that's when you find yourself in a bad situation because you have a vehicle breakdown. No one really knows where you're at, and that would violate the communication factors I always teach. Touching base on communication factors real quick, I always tell everybody to notify 3 or more people about your location, where you're going, and what your time frames are going to be to return. If you're going camping, hiking, or whatever, you want to check in the ranger station and stay specifically to the location on the map that you point out to the ranger station, and make sure that they know where you're at and when you're going to be leaving. If you do not come back out of there, that there's a chance that they could be looking for you. You can even request that if they don't hear back from you. There might be a reason to be concerned. But you definitely want to communicate with family member or friends where you're going to be, your location on a map, and what times you're going to be there and be leaving. So that could be by the date, that could be by the hour, that could be by the week. But if they don't hear back from you in a certain amount of time, you want to kind of be letting people know that to look for you if they don't hear from you. The other thing is you got to also remember when you're out there and you're off the routes and you're doing something, you want to protect your communications. And you'll find that, everybody's getting really reliant on cell phone technology and signals and all that stuff, 4G networks. But there's a lot of places that you can go to that those signals are cut out. All you got to do is dip down into a valley or be in an off-the-route location that doesn't have cell towers, and all of a sudden you have no comms to ask for help. So a 2-way radio would be good. CB radios are great. So you might want to think about adding one of those, and then you can always reach out. Those little handheld walkie-talkie, go-talk, radios where you can talk from one person to the other, those are handy to have. You're going to want to have extra batteries in your vehicle pack for communication device, electronics, flashlights, and things like that. I always try to tell people stick with self-powered, solar-powered products that you don't have to worry about batteries so much, or crank-powered generated items that you just crank it really quick and it works. Problem with crank is it doesn't last that long. You continually have to crank it, but they work. They have survival radios that have flashlights in them and buzzard alarms and radio alerts for weather patterns and all that stuff on these little kit radios. You can go to Radio Shack, get on the internet, and buy them. I highly recommend you have one for your peace of mind. But the other thing is, in your survival kit, you're going to want the basics. And your basics for survival are always going to be, fire, water, shelter, food. So your vehicle could become your shelter. You can store water on your vehicle, so why wouldn't you? You want to have a minimum of 3 to 7 days water supply for yourself, and that way you are covering your grounds. You also want to have blankets, extra food. You can get fancy and pack up a bunch of MREs or meals ready to eat, or either military style or civilian style, or whatever. You can do trail mix. You can plan your meals according to what you like, as long as you're meeting your necessities. But you're going to want to have your knives. You're going to want your pocket knife. You're going to want your blade, and I suggest a fixed blade that's strong, reinforced, maybe a survival knife. You not necessarily have to. You can get a bushcraft knife or whatever. You just need a blade. Okay, we're talking basics. I'm not talking or trying to promote a market scheme for you to go out there and buy somebody's product. What I'm trying to teach you is to have something, because having something is better than having nothing. When you need it and it's not there, it's better to have it and not have it on hand, and then not have it and need it. And so you're going to want things that make life easy for you, especially if you're going to sustain for a while. And you're going to want medical supplies, so we're going to want Band-Aids, we're going to want, antiseptic, sanitization stuff, we're going to want, alcohol, we're going to want a lot of things that you're going to need. You might even pick up a suturing kit in case you cut yourself. You could suture it up yourself. Might hurt a little bit, but hey, you never know. A snake bite kit wouldn't be bad. A water filtration straw that can filter up to 300 or 500 gallons of water, and those aren't really that expensive, actually. You can even get them at your local retail outlet. You're going to want to understand the basics of survival. You can rely on technology, but technology will, at some end, always fail. It always does. Okay, it either dies because the battery died, or it got dropped and broken, or it snaps and breaks, or whatever. So having the general knowledge on how to create things from raw material is always a major asset for you. And so that being said, knowing how to make bladed instruments through flint knapping or stone striking, which is flake creation, or rubbing sticks together through the bow drill, hand drill, fire drill, or fire plow and fire thong, and if you're so lucky to have a fire piston or even know how to acquire or construct one, then have that. I do suggest you carry a lighter or a Zippo. They won't last forever, but if you have the ability to have that, then you can use that as a fail or backup plan. I would always save my technology for when I absolutely have primitive fails, because primitive will fail. Primitive is determined upon weather. It's dependent on a balance of factors that's being involved, like air pressure, moisture in the air, availability, so you can either friction fires are something that you should always know how to do, and if you can do them effectively, then I would use those actually before I would use my Zippo or my Bic, because if I use the Zippo and the Bic, then I use it up, and if I'm out there for a long time, or I run out of fluid, or I lose it, or it falls and breaks, or whatever the case may be, or I just misplace it, I want to know that I can still keep myself warm and cook, all right, and boil my waters. Now, knowing how to do primitive filtering of water and layering using natural or raw materials is also a great idea too, because you could probably filter more faster using your primitive filter that is effective. And the thing about filtering and boiling is really simply this: you boil to kill, you filter to increase flavor. So it makes it more palatable when you filter your water. It might not remove the color, but you're filtering it, and it might make it more palatable to you. So, and that's how the earth operates. Water trickles through the earth, and it becomes a spring, and the next thing you know, you get fresh, clean spring water because it's been filtering through the earth. surface water is the water you really got to watch out for, because it's open to exposure to different factors that can cause contamination. And also, we live in a different world today than we did, many years ago, because now we have pollution. So that's the other thing too. And then also our ability for our body makeup is less tolerable to deal with parasitics such as Giardia and Cryptosporidium. So we got to remember that. Now, if you're going to do chemical water treatment, you're going to want to, I suggest either you have iodine or you have chlorine dioxide. And chlorine dioxide works a lot faster than iodine. And I just think it tastes a little better than the iodine. But, and it kills more. It's a kill-all. And so iodine doesn't necessarily kill everything. That's the other thing. But if you have your water in storage on hand, and you're fortunate enough to go get you some 5-gallon containers of water, and when I say storing water, I'm not talking about going and buying 1-gallon jugs, because you want to kind of consolidate your space. You want to make it packable, and so I would suggest getting 5-gallon water containers. But you can, or a got cooler or whatever suits your needs, and because everybody has different vehicles. Some people have small little compacts, so you got to keep in mind about where all this stuff's going to fit. The other thing about your survival kit for your personal needs is you're going to want to have things that you think you would need to help assist you make things and tasks more simplified and faster. So if you have cotton balls, you're going to want to dip your cotton balls into alcohol, or have alcohol handy, or sanitizer. Hand sanitizer is flammable, and you can dab your cotton ball in some hand sanitizer and catch a spark really easy that way. And then you're going to want to seal these up and have them on hand inside a Ziploc bag that's protected. And then, with your blankets, you're going to want to have signaling devices. So they have survival blankets that are really flimsy and thin. They're kind of like film. I don't really like them too much because they rip very easy and they get holes punched in them. They work pretty effectively, but they also collect condensation through body heat, and then when that happens, you get wet through the condensation of your body heat. And in the morning hours, when you've been trying to stay warm, all of a sudden now you're freezing. So kind of line, if you can get a liner, like a poncho liner, and line this material, it'll put a barrier between you and the material, so if it does condensate, it's not directly on your skin. Fleece is a really good product to put with a survival blanket, by the way. Fleece, if it gets wet, you can wring it out and it'll still keep you warm. Wool is a good material, but when it gets wet, it gets heavy. It'll still keep you warm when it's damp and wet. You can always wring it out. But I really like fleece because it's easy to wring out, it's easy to air dry, and you can keep rocking and rolling. Now, if you're going to get a survival kit blanket, try to get it where it has a reflective or a solid color on the back. One side will be mirrored, which is great for signaling, and then the other side would have either a very bright orange, like a hunter's orange, or if we're going to go international, we would have a royal blue. Those are the survival colors, all right? If a search and rescue person or plane or aircraft sees the color royal blue displayed out as a signaling device, they're going to identify that as a distress signal. Did you know that? Okay, so remember that. Royal blue or bright hunter's orange, okay? Not camouflage, not OD green, all right? Remember, the military stuff is designed to not be seen, whereas in the civilian world, you want to be seen. You want to be known. You want your position to be known. So kind of try to remember that. Also, signaling. You're going to want to have the ability to flash signal and communicate long distances. So an air horn would be great. You can get a little can of air, and it's got a little horn on it, like you see at the baseball and football games or whatever sporting activity you favor. You've all heard it go "Meow" in the crowd. And then there's also mirrors, all right, spot mirror, reflective mirrors, signaling mirrors, whatever you want to call it, or any kind of reflective material, even your survival blanket. But if you can refract light off of it and bounce it back to somebody else, you can do that for several miles, especially if you're on the high ground and you're shooting that light down into the valley or to another mountaintop, and you're signaling for help. So with your vehicle as a survival kit and a survival shelter, you want to make it so that way you could stay warm. And you might have to cannibalize your vehicle if you're really sustaining for a long time, and use what's in your vehicle to help save your life. And that's stripping wiring, that could be making cordage out of what the vehicle carries, that could be making blankets or clothing, it could be a lot of stuff. And you have upholstery, you have paneling, you have under the dash, you have behind the dash, and you have in the hood. So if you're cannibalizing your vehicle, try to not cannibalize things that are going to totally immobilize your vehicle if you plan on recovering it. But if there is no recovering the vehicle because you had major breakdown, then you might just have to do what you got to do. Now, don't start a fire inside your vehicle, inside of a can. Be very smart about it. It's too easy for your vehicle to catch fire. You want to keep your fire away from your fuel tank. You want to remember that you have a fuel tank, and if your vehicle broke down, it wasn't because of gas running empty. Then just make sure you keep a spark away from the fuel. But now you have a fuel source of starting fire, and you can run a fabric cloth product down into there and pull out, making a wick and get some fuel that way, or siphon it out a little bit, and then keep that separated from your fire or your campfire. When you're setting a campfire, always remember that nature's combustible, and be responsible if you're setting your fires. Put it in a safe place, line it with some rock, try to keep the fire under control, and be responsible with your fire. Just because you're in a survival situation doesn't mean that you're exempt. You need to be, fire safety conscious at all times. And you need to watch your fire, and you need to ensure your fire gets put out. You need to cover it up. These are all things that everybody should know, but not everybody practices because of laziness. All right, and laziness is what starts forest fires. So, we don't need California burning down. But, at the same time, some people might want California to burn down. Anyway, so with your vehicle survival kit, if you're trying to recover it, how are you going to do that if you don't have certain items on hand? All right. Now, hoses, belts, fix-a-flat, and little things like that, like something that you can plug into the cigarette lighter and pump up your tire with air. It could be something as simple as a little portable pump. You want to kind of plan ahead for what could happen, and then provide those items in case it did happen. So that's common sense, thinking outside the box a little bit. But when it comes to warm climate weather, we have to have considerations for that, because they are different than cold climate weather. So since we're coming out of a colder season and going into warmer months, we want to make sure that we have things to protect us from the elements. So if you're in a hot vehicle and it's the summertime and you can't start your vehicle and you're using it for shelter, you're going to want to ventilate it out. You're going to want to have the windows down. You're going to want to keep it as cool as possible in there as much as possible. But if you're out smack dab in the middle of the sun being exposed, then your vehicle becomes a hot box. It can get up to 180 degrees or hotter inside the vehicle, and people have died due to that, and especially children and little babies, and dogs, and animals. So you want to make sure that you're aware of that, because you might be okay. You might say, hey, wait here, and you leave your kid behind. And that's not really a smart idea to leave them in a vehicle anyway by themselves. no matter if it was a survival situation or not, because then you lose eyesight with them and communication. And what if you got lost going out to go find water, couldn't get back, and now you have a little kid that's all lost and scared? So bring the kid with you, and that's their handicap. And then keep them in earshot. You should be able to come up with a signal where you go, woohoo! And then they respond with a woohoo! Really loud, or, or whistle, or something like that. Or I would include a survival whistle that's very loud. I had a company that I endorsed called Storm, and Storm made these whistles, and it was pretty neat. And they're really loud. And so I would keep survival whistles on hand. I would keep cordage and paracord on hand. I would wear a survival bracelet. But believe it or not, that still doesn't replace the ability to make primitive cordage out of fibrous materials and plants and roots and bark and things like that. So you want to have the skill sets to complement you in case you ever needed to fall back on them. And then use things that are more convenient in modern technology, like I was saying earlier. Fishing hooks, really good for your survival kit. The ability to either chop or saw is a very good one. So I would keep an axe in my survival kit, not a hatchet, an axe. And I might even keep a sharpening stone for the axe as well, because having it sharp, you have a really, really super sharp axe, you can use it to cut just like you would a knife. But you also have the ability to chop much easier the sharper the axe is. So keep your blade sharp, keep your handle from breaking. So to keep it from breaking, a lot of folks will wrap the handle ahead of time. You see some axes that are wrapped after they break, but a lot of folks actually pre-wrap them, and they have some really strong tape now that once you tape it on there, it's like hard as steel, and it will hold your axe handle pretty darn good, keep it from breaking. If you want to include a hatchet, then by all means, please do. You want to have sheltering material just in case you need it, because if you leave the vehicle, you will still have the ability to shelter in place when you get to where you're going, unless you find a hasty shelter. So you're going to want to have a tarp or a poncho or a tent. So you're going to need something like that. And always remember, if you're making a shelter, you want to keep that shelter as constricted as possible, so that way your body heat can warm it up. And if you do happen to start a fire, you can burn a fire at, fairly close to the opening of it with a firewall, pushing the heat back into your shelter, or you can heat the inside of your shelter with warm rocks. Just don't use rocks that were ever submerged in water, because they'll pop like popcorn and turn into little frag grenades and could cause eye injury, or, be pretty dangerous and hurt. Might just hurt you. Might not permanently hurt you, but it might hurt. But what if a flake hits you in the eye and you lose your sight? So you got to be careful. So rocks that were in water or have the chance of being submerged into water are really not a wise thing to use. So use earth rocks, not rocks from riverbeds, creeks, lakes, and oceans and stuff like that. All right. So you got to kind of remember that in survival mode, it's about prevention. It's about prevention and management. It is about not putting yourself at unnecessary risk. It's not about certain things that you see on television. In survival mode, it's about sustaining or self-rescuing. And so self-rescuing is really dangerous because you're crossing terrain. And you could either want to get lost or you could get injured. And if you're already injured, then that makes traveling a lot more harder. So you're going to know a little bit about terrain association and navigation and map reading too. So it's really a good idea to not trust GPS devices because they can fail. The number one failure about GPS devices is the battery could die. The second failure is they can break. And the third failure is they're not always very accurate, especially if they're not picking up full signal. And that signal interruption could be due to cloud coverage, or you're just not catching a signal because of the terrain around you. And just sometimes they're just not programmed completely 100% and can put you off your route. So maps. If you're going to go somewhere and you're traveling, you should have a regional map. Even if it's a road map, at least you have something that's better than nothing. So at least you can triangulate, well, I need to get to this area because last I knew I was around here. If you can get a GPS or MGRS military grid reference map, or a good outdoor hiking backpacking map that shows you contour lines and stuff like that, that's the better type of map that you could have. Topography is really important for people when they're navigating, to know exactly where they're at. And then having the ability to do compass bearing, shooting at azimuth, knowing your cardinal directions, and knowing pace count, and knowing how much distance you've crossed is really important. The more accurate type of measurement for traveling is in metrics, not standard. When you're driving a vehicle in the United States, it shows you miles, but there's also kilometers there. Well, you break the kilometers down, now we're into meters. So, and you can effectively do a really good pace count with meters, going out to 100 meters and knowing what your 100-meter pace count is. Then you know that there's 1,000 meters in a square kilometer, and you know that there's 1.6 kilometers makes a standard U.S. mile. So knowing that will help you with traveling distance. So, and terrain has a lot to do with your navigation. So if you are in a position where you have to negotiate, one thing is you might come into situations where you have to cross territory and terrain that are challenging. And so you want to always take the path of least resistance. You always want to try to stay in a very noticeable area and avoid being hidden, especially if you are lost and stranded and seeking rescue. You want to stay exposed so that you can be seen, but you don't want to be exposed to weather. So when you're traveling, always give yourself enough time to reestablish your shelter, or remake a shelter, or a hasty shelter, or find shelter, or whatever. You never want to travel till the last minute and then try to build your shelter when it's dark. You never want to travel in, the wilderness in the dark, because that's when you're going to get hurt and more lost. It doesn't matter how great you are at celestial navigation. What we're concerned about in the safety world is injuries. Injuries happen a lot more and are more prevalent when you're traveling from dusk to dawn. So remember that. So it's better to travel in hours where the sun's not at the peak. And so when the break of day or dawn just about to begin, that's a good time to get up and start your traveling. And so you want to travel light. You don't want to travel too heavy with load bearing unless you're really seasoned at it, because it's going to wear you down. You always want to protect your extremities, your hands and your feet and your head. You want to keep your head warm or cool depending on the temperature, and you want to control your core temperature. So you don't want your core temperature to drop, and you definitely don't want it to rise too high. So you want to always keep an equilibrium on that. A good way to keep your core temperature cool is, one, consume water, and consume what you can. I would never ration my water so much to the point where I'm still thirsty. I'm just kind of rationing. I would drink it, because your water does you no good if it's not in your body. It's just better to have enough water. So if you're packing water, then have enough. And it's 3 to 7 days at minimum, so it just depends on where you're going to be, You could be in a survival situation for 3 or 4 days, and if you had 3 days supply of necessities for food and water, you'll be great. You'll be fine. You might be uncomfortable, but you're probably not going to die. But if you don't have enough water and it's super hot out, you can potentially have a heat injury on day one and be really hurting come 3 days later after multiple days of exposure. So you got to remember that too. So one thing that is really a major consideration for folks when they are traveling is really good footwear. You want to have footwear that's gripping. And so you might be wearing flip-flops when you're driving, but in your survival kit you got a really good pair of boots or hiking boots, or everybody in the vehicle does. So recreational vehicles, obviously, are vehicles that have a tendency to get places a little bit deeper into the wilderness. So whatever that wilderness might be for you. But recreational vehicles such as dirt bikes and quads and even RVs, actually, people take them a little bit deeper than they do the average car because they plan to go out there and either play or they plan to go out there and stay and camp for a while. So they think they're going to be out there for a little bit longer. The thing with recreational vehicles is you always want to know your point of no return. If you're on a dirt bike and you're taking off in a straight line distance, you don't want to go past your point of no return. So know how many kilometers or miles that your gas tank in your tank, when it's full, will take you. And when you get to about half of what's in your tank, if you're a straight line distance, it's probably a good time to turn around and head back because you want to be closer to your start point than where you were, at the end state when you ran out of fuel. So you don't want to be too far out because how will you get back? Most recreational vehicles, not all of them, but most of them, probably do have headlights on them, but not all of them. It depends on the make and the model. So traveling at night might be okay with certain vehicles, and then traveling at night might not. So you got to also keep track of your daylight hours if you don't happen to have artificial illuminated light from a headlight. So flashlights are great, and they really are a survival tool too. Usually you can use the concave lens of the flashlight that pushes the light outward. It reflects the light from the bulb and pushes it forward. You can use that to start fires with too. I think that's been seen plenty times around the internet and on television. But we also want to have clothing and layerings, and we want to have a change of socks. We want to have, gloves. You always want to protect your hands. We want to protect your grip, but we want to keep your hands from freezing and being cold. So we want to be able to have the ability to layer up. So pack, even though it's summertime, you still want to pack warm clothes, believe it or not, because it can get cold at night and be really hot in the daytime. And it might get really hot. It could be 115 degrees in the middle of a really hot Texas day, and then at night that temperature drops to around 70 or 80, and you're shivering. So bring a layering of clothing. Bring something that will keep you warm. Protect your feet. Rotate your socks out. And I would always recommend a walking stick. Something possibly if you're in an area prone for snakes, poisonous snakes, have something with the forked tip. One of the ends of the end of the walking stick is forked and at least 6 feet long, 6.5 feet preferably, but 6 feet. So that way you can pin it down and kill it without getting too close to it. But it's just best to avoid wildlife and not mess with the wildlife, because what can hurt you can kill you. You get bit by a snake and no one's there to rescue you, and you got venom pumping through your system. It's going to be in your system, and how are you going to get rescued for that? So think ahead. What you see on TV isn't always the actual right thing to do. It's what you could do, but not always the right thing for you to do. But if you're starving and all there was that rattlesnake, and you needed to eat that thing, and you're pretty sure you want to take the risk of messing with it, then you're going to do what you think you have to do at that time. I would avoid it if I was talking to a novice, or I was talking to someone that doesn't deal with that or hasn't ever actually used that method to kill a snake before. I would kind of try to avoid it. But yes, you can. But it's always best to avoid playing with the wildlife. Also knowing your plants. Before you set out on a trip and you think you're going to be in a region, get on the internet and research what type of edible plants are in that region and get familiar with them. And then when you're out there, before it's a critical survival situation, try to identify them with your cheat notes or with your survival manual. That's another thing that needs to be in your survival kit for your vehicle, is a survival handbook. And I would even recommend going as far as a survival app on your cell phone. if you have the ability to put an app on your cell phone, you should have that. And then you can open it up as long as you have signal. Unless you can get an app that's not signal reliant. It's just an app you download that has some cheat notes in it. However, when you are in your vehicle and you are traveling and you do find yourself in a survival situation, the number one thing that you need to do is realize that, one, you're still alive, two, you're not injured, hopefully, and you're okay. You can sustain. Try to remember this concept, folks. When you're in a survival situation, remember, people have been there and done what you're about to do, and were successful and lived quite a healthy life doing what you're about to do for many years before technology got around. When the Pilgrims landed in the United States, before it was the United States, it was just a continent with Indians on it, and they discovered America, right? And then the settlers came, and then the frontiersmen came. They lived off the land, and they traveled across the United States, and they got all the way to the Pacific coast, all right, from the East Coast. And they made their way. It took them several months, but they lived predominantly off of what Mother Earth was providing for them and skill sets. Yes, they might have had weapons. They might have had some rifles or pistolas, but what they also had was basic common survival skill factors. Everybody knows you need to eat. Everybody knows you need water, all right? And so having the ability to know what to eat and where to get water and how to treat your water is going to really take you, 50% of the way. The other factor is knowing how to stay out of the elements, knowing how to shelter, knowing how to keep the sun off of you, the wind off of you, the rain off of you, the snow off of you, the sleet off of you, the hail off of you, and the morning dew. All right. You want to protect yourself. You want to counterbalance whatever Mother Nature is offering. If Mother Nature is too hot, you want to try to build shade to stay cool. All right. And if Mother Nature is too cold, you're going to want to layer up, insulate, and build a fire. So whatever Mother Nature is offering you, you want to counter it. If Mother Nature is offering you a sandstorm, then you want to build a shelter that will keep the sand and the wind and the storm out of your face. You want to protect your eyes. You want to protect your hands. You want to protect your feet. You want to protect your core temperature. All right. Those are things that you have to protect, because without those, you're no good. So protecting yourself from the elements is always going to be your priority, no matter what survival situation you truly are in. All right. The one thing I think that is really a benefiting factor for people is knowing first aid. So CPR, obviously, because if you're with someone that's choking, you know how to, clear their airway. You know how to do the Heimlich maneuver. You know how to resuscitate breathing. You know how to check a pulse. You might have to know how to give artificial breaths. You might need to know how to do chest compressions. You might need to know these things. So that all being said, you're also going to need to know how to treat for injury. All right, and I'm not talking just physical injury. I'm talking treat for heat casualty. How to treat for cold weather injuries. How to, treat for shock. So, remember, when you have a broken bone, you want to isolate that. You want to secure it, and you want to immobilize it. So you're going to want to splint it. That can go with your leg, your arm. And unfortunately there's not a lot you can do for toes, and you can split your fingers, and ribs are really bad too, because there's not a whole lot you can do for ribs if you break a rib or a collarbone, except for go to a doctor, and really all the doctor's going to do is tape your ribs up, and if you break a collarbone, you might have surgery, and they might have to physically repair that through surgery. But you definitely want to know how to put on a tourniquet. If someone loses a limb or has some major arterial bleeding, maybe it just is best to throw on a tourniquet and put it on the highest part of the extremity. Years ago, they used to teach put it 2 inches above the injury and then tourniquet it down. But to really save from blood loss and bleeding out, certain injuries, you might want to go higher up. Just get it at the source. Now, if you're in a situation where that person might not get medical help for a long time, I would, at that time, go lower on the extremity, because if you go higher, you're going to kill the arm or the leg. But if you're certain you can get them to rescue soon enough, then you're going to want to put the tourniquet higher up to limit more blood loss. However, whatever you tourniquet off, if it doesn't, and it should only be removed by a doctor, a tourniquet. Once you put it on, it's supposed to stay there. It's not supposed to get removed. And it will become uncomfortable to the person wearing it. It will. And their arm's going to go numb, and it's going to hurt, and they're going to go through the motions on it. So if I know that I'm in a situation and say someone got an extremity cut off, and there's no chance on hell that we're going to be able to escape our situation and get medical help, then I would go 2 to 2.5 inches above the actual injury and tourniquet it off there, and try to keep low as I can so the person doesn't lose the entire, limb. So, I think that people should know, the difference between, bandaging. There's pressure dressings, and then there's just dressings, and knowing when to use one. So remember, arterial bleeding is bright red blood. That's arterial. That's blood that just went through the heart. It just got oxygenated. And if it's dark, that's blood that's coming from the veins that has been used and headed back to the heart. So dark blood is usually not as bright red as blood that just got from an artery. So arterial bleeding is something that's got to be stopped, right away. So that's where that tourniquet would come into place. Injuries that are requiring of pressure dressing would be less severe, but you still need to cut that off so it has a chance to scab up. And so you would, ball up something and use some strapping and strap a pressure dressing down onto the injury. Now, a cut and a scrape, little cuts and little scrapes, yeah, you can just put a bandage over it or a Band-Aid, depending on how small it is. We want to really pay attention to keeping things clean and sanitized around the area of an injury, because when you are out into the elements, you're exposed to a lot more things than if you were in a controlled environment. So you want to keep the area clean. You want to avoid submerging into water that's not treated, or bodies of water. And remember, you can absorb Giardia through drinking it. You can get it through your ears, cryptosporidium, and you can get it through your eyes. You can get it through the openings of your body. It can be absorbed into those because, in your nostrils, if you're swimming, That's why some people get sick when they go swimming, because they choked on some water while they were swimming, and they don't realize it. And the next thing you know, they're really sick, So there's a lot of factors you got to worry about. I would just not put yourself at risk doing certain things that you didn't need to, unless it was absolutely necessary. If you're going to be packing, and hiking, and you did go out on your vehicle, and you hit up a trail, and you're out there, an alpaca raft would be pretty good for you. You can go pack rafting, and you can cross bodies of water and move pretty rapidly, and it packs up into your backpack, and you're ready to rock and roll and get on out there. Or if you were in a survival situation, you travel down the body of water, try to find civilization and save yourself. But terrain association, map reading, understanding how to read maps and all these things, in combination with your survival kit and combination with the vehicle kit, should really give you enough to be successful at getting rescue. And then if you did all your backwards planning correctly, you notified the right people, you shouldn't be out there very long. But that's only if you did things right. Now, in a survival situation, a lot of times it was unplanned. It didn't mean for it to happen. It was unplanned. So, if you can adopt certain behavioral patterns and habits that you make standardized whenever you're traveling, you actually will always have a plan. But a lot of people, they just get up and go and they go do things. They don't really think it through. They're flying by the moment. They're influenced by other people. And the next thing you know, you find yourself out there and now you're in the spot when you didn't anticipate. And a lot of times the survival situations do come from when people are traveling. You know, it's not like you're going camping and you're going to be in a survival situation. It's when you're going from and to. So, and that could be either on foot, that could be on, a recreational vehicle, or that could be a civilian vehicle, or by air, or by boat. So it's usually when people are traveling that they find that. So why not be smart, plan ahead, and pack your traveling? So you get a lot of guys with survival kits, and they'll pack it in their backpack, go hiking, and they're living off their kit. And then they come on back, and they're basically testing how they can survive on their kit. There's nothing really wrong with that. They're practicing, and practice makes perfect. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's the folks that don't practice that have the issues. It's really the folks that are trying to be like their celebrity idol or whoever it is they follow on television or whatever that they see, and they want to go out and do some of the really cool stuff. There's nothing wrong with doing the really cool stuff as long as you are putting safety mechanisms in place. Got to remember, all those fans, that were watching all these TV shows, they all don't realize, or not all, but a lot of them don't realize that a lot of planning went into what they were doing before they pressed the record button and started filming the episodes. There's a lot of scouting that goes on. There's a lot of surveys that goes on. There's a lot of, planning and backwards planning, and there's a lot of safety mechanisms that have been looked at before the shots were filmed. It's not like they just hit the ground and they're running after some crazy maniac and he's jumping from planes, or he's, finding himself in a precarious situation. There's nothing precarious about a situation. They already planned it ahead of time. They knew exactly the path of travel he would take. There was no surprises. Never. It might look that way on film, but there weren't. So you guys got to remember that. Also, I've seen stuff on survival television that was just uncalled for. Absolutely uncalled for. Climbing a train trestle that's 150 feet in the air on a greasy chain that you just happen to grappling hooked over the ledge of a concrete barrier, slipping in between concrete blocks with a gap in it and hoping that pinched chain is permanently fixed there, then climbing the chain and up and over. However cool that really was, it looked pretty cool, and it was pretty brave, I guess, of the guy. I'm not going to drop names, but pretty brave of him. But also very stupid to show a bunch of impressionable minds all around the world that was cool. I wouldn't have shot that shot. I would have showed them the right way. I would have showed them, it might be the longer way around, but folks, this is the smarter way. But that's the thing about entertainment and television is there's we got an educational factor, but an entertainment goal. And that's the difference between real life and television and radio, is your entertainment factor. If it's not there, no one's going to watch his show. The educational goal is there, but it's more like it's a theme. So remember, Man vs. Wild and all these Survivor Man shows and all these, survival shows, their intention is to teach you something, but they also have to have that entertainment aspect there. Now, to keep you tuning in. Naked and Afraid. If there wasn't naked women on that show, I don't know anybody that would watch it, because they really don't teach. There's no education thing. You're just watching two people survive. And the only reason why it got popular is because there's naked chicks on it. And that's my personal opinion. Naked and Afraid doesn't do teaching. It does a lot of relationship drama and how they survive together, taking a strange man and a strange woman and putting them in an environment together and it's the battle of the sexes. It's how this one guy interacts with this naked woman, how this one woman interacts with this naked man, and I think the global audience is watching it just because of the fact that two people that are naked want to see how they get along and if they can survive for 21 days. All right, that's not survival. That's camping, guys. The only difference is they're camping naked, which is a nudist colony. In my head, that's basically a nudist colony with some people pretending to survive. And now they might be surviving, and they might actually go through some harshness, but they know they can quit at any time, and they know that there's a film crew there, and they know that the film crew's not going to let them die, and they know that in 21 days they're done. All right, so it's really just a fabricated survival scenario. There is no real survival situation. They're just surviving for 21 days. So, but in the real world, you don't have that guarantee that they do. Eventually Bear Grylls is gonna, turn the video camera off and stop filming. Eventually, Naked and Afraid is gonna have a helicopter come and rescue them, or a rescue crew. All right, so eventually their scenario does come to a safe ending, and which is it's supposed to. But you guys, if you're out there in a survival situation and you have all you got is a vehicle pack and all you got is a survival kit to sustain yourself, but you're really lost and you're really stranded, and in this situation that you are in, if it becomes a reality for you, it's going to be a very scary experience. And I've talked and taught a lot and wrote and done a lot of stuff about the psychology factor of the survival situation. It's a very despairing, hopeless, helpless situation. It's pretty much going to be very scary. And the only way to defeat that is realizing that you're going to be okay. You really are. You're not going to get killed. You're not going to get maimed. You're not going to starve to death, and you're not going to dehydrate and die as long as you're educated. Now, if you're not educated, then yeah, all those other critical implications could happen to you if you're not educated. So being educated, having knowledge is power, and you should continually add to your knowledge base. I see a lot of folks on different venues with really cool survival kits and really cool survival concepts, and I think it's amazing. This is really a trend for the survival world where it's really taken off, and a lot of people are doing things to, jump in on it. I don't think the trend's going to go away anytime soon. I think it's going to get bigger. I think doomsday prepping is getting bigger. I think just being prepared in general is bigger. And a lot of people are more conscious of it now. And a lot of it could do with TV shows. A lot of it could do with YouTube videos. A lot of it could do with social media. There's a lot of influencing going on. So, but I would always say the best idea is to be professionally trained and sit down with someone that is professionally trained that can teach you what you need to know through demonstration and discussion point and practical examination and testing, and then having you do it with practice. Those are all the things that will make you successful. So, building a shelter and making it waterproof, is not always the easiest thing because you are 100% reliant on your raw material, unless you have artificial shelter. But even then, artificial shelter can get ruined. It can fall apart. It can get stolen. There's whatever, a lot of things that can happen that make for a bad situation. Or you forgot it, it's whatever. But you still need to know how to take advantage of hasty shelters and improved shelters and technological sheltering, and sheltering in place. And you should always do shelter improving. And when you're in a survival situation, there is no naked and afraid lounging around and talking about your partner like, I can't get along with this person. What, they said they're this and they're not. What's their skill set? To me, that's drama, garbage ball, Babylon, and it causes for entertainment. However, a real survival show, in my opinion, should be packed full of educational content that's not regurgitated content. If you want to know about this, you go back to episode this. But each episode after that is not a regurgitated episode of braggerish, egocentric stuff, or a regurgitated factor of skill sets. It should be forward momentum, always moving forward into the next topic to actually build a platform for educational content that isn't repeated. And I see a lot of repeating in a lot of these shows. And my Survival Trek Escape show that I've been working on for a long time, trying to get made. Eventually we will. It's just, we got to get past development. We got to get the investors on board with the Survival Trek Escape. And we just got to build the production. So at one point I had it, and then I had a marriage collapse, and so it kind of took a hiatus for a while off of things. So in a survival situation, we want to always come out with our heads up, and the only way you're going to do that is defeating fear. So defeating fear comes through education and preparation, and education is the critical thing. All right, preparation and planning, doing risk mitigation and understanding safety factors is always the priority for you. All right, so hey, this is Dan Shrigley. I've had a great time talking to you, and I hope you enjoyed this educational content on Survival Talk Radio by Dan Shrigley via Survival Trek Escape. And we'll talk to you later, and have a great day.
You're listening to Daniel W. Shrigley's Survival Talk Radio, the official survival talk radio of America's Survival Son. Come and learn survival.